I don't know. I don't know why I started that way, but
Yo,
that's how it's just, it was a sound. It was in my head. I had to get it out. And I figured
I,
this podcast was the best place to do that. So you guys had to live that experience with me. It's kind of trombone, kind of saxophone. It's a talent, guys. Don't worry about it.
for a minute
Anyway,
there, I thought we were gonna go back to the old school ways of you just doing a full blown like freestyle intro.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought I
that's
thought
what I thought was
we had
no, no,
coming.
left
no,
that in the
no.
past, but
No, it's
then
just I just had a thought, a creative thought in my brain. I don't know why, what it is. Maybe that's the
hey,
new intro. Welcome to Cars and Kicks, people. Or maybe that's our transition, like back
roll
with
with it.
what was it, Batman back in the days when it was and then
Yeah.
you go to like a
Yeah.
transition. Maybe it's and that's how we transition. I don't know. We're making things up here at the beginning of the podcast, people, just because we're excited to be here and we're happy to see you. So I get all giddy and things on the inside. Anyway,
Yeah.
this is the Cars and Kicks podcast. I am Jacques. I am the host sneaker guy here, and I like to talk about sneakers a lot. But I'm learning a lot more about cars because of the two co-hosts that we have here. If it was just me, this would be just about sneakers, and it would probably get boring pretty quickly because I have so much sneaker knowledge in my brain that I would get into the weeds really easily. I saw a video today about CBS Morning about the 40th anniversary of the Air Jordan basketball shoe, and they kept referring to every shoe in the video as the Air Jordan basketball shoe. No, like Jordan
Ooh.
1 or Jordan 7 or Jordan 14 or Jordan 23 or Jumpman Jacks. It was just, it's the 40th anniversary of the Jordan basketball shoe. And
Oh.
like part of me inside was just like burning and dying. But then I was like, you know what? You know what? You know too much about it. And this is how normal people relate to Jordan basketball shoes. They're not
And
like, oh, that's
then
the 14 in this color. Oh, that's the one in this color. Ooh, ooh, ooh. No, they're like, that's the Jordan basketball shoe. And maybe sorry, I'm ranting. Go
so
ahead, Eric. What were you saying?
I was gonna say CBS. If you guys received an email from Jacques Karen Slade this morning, that's probably what it was referencing. So no, I am with you on that though. I 100% agree because I find myself on the car side of things going into that. If somebody misrepresents something that they're talking about in the news or whatever, like mispronounces Porsche, for example, or talks about a color that's not the actual name of the color. It's not yellow, it's speed yellow, things like that. So I'm with you, Jacques. I back you up 100%. If CBS comes and fires back at you, then I'm right there. I got you
You got
back.
my back.
I
See,
do.
and that's why he's the co-host, ladies and gentlemen. Eric, give him your information so they know everything about you.
Yeah, that's
Gosh, dang
it's
it.
that's me, Erik Valdez here, car guy, passionate car guy, also homie, and we'll back up my brothers whenever needed. So CBS, back off. Yeah, and then we've also got Nick here today. Nick, you are the one that's going to get us back on track because that's what you do. What's going on, Nick?
That's a tough task, man, because I have so many questions. But yeah, my name's Nick. Love sneakers, love cars. You know what's funny about cars and kicks? Both of these worlds, you guys would probably agree that we get more credibility in these worlds by being nerdy, being overly
Yeah.
protective of the colors, the names, the stories. And then once we step out of these worlds, we're just kind of nerds about it all, And CBS is like, we don't need you. Don't email us. Don't,
Right.
Right. We
Like,
don't care
don't
about the technicalities.
yeah.
at all. At all. I was like, this is the most general purpose sneaker story I've ever heard about a 40th anniversary. Like they
But
even had
there's that.
Howard, they had D Wells, and like I mean, I was like, oh,
Wow.
okay, like they're
Yeah.
gonna get into it. And
Yeah.
even like they took like the smallest quote from them that could just be kind of generically applied to the Air Jordan basketball shoe. And I was like,
Yeah.
you know what? I was telling my wife, I was like, it's so interesting to see how the general public speaks about sneakers versus like my circle of people speak about sneakers. And so I feel like there's a lesson in there that I need to learn about how I create content or something. There's a lesson in there somewhere that
Yeah.
most people don't need to get into the weeds. That's a very specific conversation, and that I
But
need to be able
there's
to.
people behind the scenes at CBS that are just
Cringing.
cringing when that
Yes.
goes out because they're like, wait, we got the right people on. We asked
Yes.
the questions and you cut out all the things that made us authentic, like
Oh, trust me, there have been moments, when I've been on set filming something, And the writers, bless their hearts, they have a very, very hard job.
Yes.
And not all of them are going to be experts on everything. It's oftentimes, for whatever reason, we take writers, producers for granted and be like, well, they should have researched this. They should have. No, they have a million things going on at any given time.
Yeah.
Either way, all that is to say, I've been on set before, different productions, won't name names or whatever, and I get a script and I'm reading it and I'm like, especially if it pertains to like a car and it's talking about, the speed or horsepower, whatever the reference is, and I'm like, I'm not saying this, guys. That is not how it would be. And I'm not one of these like actors that has to like stand up and like rewrite every scene by any means. But when it comes to cars, I will make sure that even if it's not Erik Valdez on camera, I'm whatever character it is, my character, unless he's completely not supposed to know anything about cars, then it makes sense. If he's supposed to in that scene sound authentic, best believe I'm rewriting that little scene. So all that is to say, it has a time and a place for all of this, all the details, I guess.
So now to take the podcast totally off track here. So I've been thinking about that a lot more because I've been thinking about writing a lot more and just like how every single thing matters. Like
every detail
matters. But there are often times when whatever the information is, it just serves the plot and it's not necessarily because it's accurate. So you have to kind of find, I guess you like, and then if you want to change that, then you probably have to change something else in the story because there was a nugget that was dropped in the first line of the movie. So you got like all of these things kind of tie together. So I've been thinking about that a lot more. But to hear you say that, like, I wonder how many writers would be like, that's a throwaway line just because we wanted him to talk about a car versus, oh, that car is what the main suspect was driving in the thing, and that's why it matters. Like, you know what I mean? So it's so weird.
But that's the approach to take every time. Sorry, we're going way off. Yeah,
we're gonna get to cars and kicks, but I've got some stuff to say about this topic.
Let's hear it, Nick.
So there's this common thing, right? Kill your darlings, all of that in the editing world and in all of creative world, right? Like you can't get too attached to things. But when you watch, let's say people that are talking about producing films or whatever, everything that usually gets cut out is the thing that connects you to a very diehard audience. And to me, that is one of the most important things about any thing that I watch or consume is that they have the level of nuance that I would want in conversations with like you guys. So if the approach is always to cut out those like extra lines that are going to go one step further into a colorway of a shoe or one step further into specs of a car, it pulls it into this general population area that makes it less interesting for me as a passionate person about those things. I don't want to pick on any particular films out there, but like there's plenty of films that we've watched in the sneaker space and in the car space, like over the last 20 years where you're just like, how did that get through when the whole thing is trying to be as authentic and real as possible, especially nowadays, right? Like authenticity is everything that you're told about any kind of storytelling, because like you want to hear that story from as close to the source as possible, because that's what makes the story great,
Right.
Yeah.
I think it goes back to, a couple things. I think most of my career, I'd say 80% of my career has been in television. And in television, it's arguably more difficult for a variety of reasons because you've got, instead of, 90 minutes to 120 minutes to tell a story, if you're doing, episodic television and you're lucky to be on a successful show, you've got storylines that get intertwined and get called back and all sorts of stuff for like years on end, right? So details do matter, and sometimes those things need to be in there, but you're always up against a timeline, right? Like you got 44 minutes to fill because in an hour-long episodic television show, because the other 22, or excuse me, I can't even do math right now, the other 16 minutes is dedicated to our advertisers, right? That's where the revenue is generated. So if you are, 30 seconds too long and you can pull out 5 seconds from this scene, 6 seconds from that scene, etc., That's where you got to kill the darlings. And some of those details that are going to only matter to like 20% of your audience, they hit the cutting room floor. In film, for example, I don't buy that excuse as much because you're not under the same, if it's a for TV movie, maybe, but if you're just doing a straight film and you opt to cut out details for whatever reason, if you think that's only going to resonate with 5% of the audience or whatever, that's a poor excuse in my opinion, because you don't have a runtime that you're really trying to meet. Nobody's going to care if your movie is 90 minutes or 98 minutes or 123. Like, you can have whatever runtime you need for the story, right? So
Yeah.
I think it varies by genre, but either way, again, we've completely gone off on a whole other tangent
Totally.
there.
Completely. So for those of you listening, this is definitely not the direction we were supposed to go, but that just sparked a thought in my head because, shout out to CBS. This is all their fault. Speaking of going off the rails, look at this transition. Jaguar, or Wagwar,
Yes.
depending on where you're from.
Wait, does anybody say Jaguar?
Wagwar. Their branding situation seems to be getting more and more out of control. There was a big hoopla. Let's say there was a bit of a dust up when they originally announced their rebrand. What was that, like 6 months ago?
I don't know if it was that long ago,
probably.
but it at most 6. It was somewhere between 3 and 6. Time flies these days, but yes, it was definitely not more than 6 months ago. So relatively short.
And they changed their perspective on things.
Mm-hmm.
And some people on this podcast thought it was terrible. Some people didn't think it was as terrible, and they didn't think it was good, but they weren't complaining about it. But Jaguar themselves have come out and sided with some people on this podcast and like, oh, this wasn't right. We need to hire a new agency. So my question for the car guys here, why did it take so long to admit that this was terrible? And two, aren't you not supposed to admit defeat? Like, what's happening here?
Look, this all ties into what if we can reference the old podcast, I don't remember exactly what I said verbatim, but it ties into one of my theories, which was this was by design to get all sorts of people talking about it. And they went into it knowing full well that it was laughable and that the designs and everything weren't actually going to be able to be, converted into real life. Like, it was designed to get people talking, etc. They got talking. Well, then it falls out of the news cycle, right? So we let a little time pass. Well, guess what? They're back in the news cycle now because they're admitting that they may have flubbed the rebrand and now they need to rebrand the rebrand. And I think it's buying them time. I think, like I said before, it's a free focus group. So they got to see in real time what people's comments were, good and bad, about the logo, about the font they used, about the cars that they put out there that looked like they were straight off of, the Batman cartoon, etc., which that was kind of badass. But either way, not really doable in real life. So I think this is still part of the plan. I think they're staying the course.
Interesting.
They're now back in the news cycle, and it's going to get people talking about them again, and it still buys them some more time to figure out exactly what they really want to do. So that's still my theory. I'm going to stick by that. I don't know. I don't know that too many massive companies like Jaguar would have the, like, I almost think that it takes more guts to pump fake a design change, a luxury branding change, than it does to actually just go through the design change itself and like run with it. Because like they haven't really introduced any of those cars that were kind of teased with it. They haven't really done much in the 6 months that would warrant anybody thinking about the rebrand again, right? So to me, it just feels kind of like they're just unsure about everything. And this is just a part of them like trying to figure it out. But I still think that I just don't think they lose any customers from that rebrand. The people that are looking at Jaguar and wanting, the nostalgic aspect of the brand and the things that we would all say made the brand popular or successful,
I don't think any of those people are walking away because the new rebrand looks different. I think the new rebrand, if anything, just feels more uppity, and like that probably aligns with people that are going to buy a brand new Jaguar. Like most of the people that I think of that drive Jaguars are the types of people like Erik and I that would be like, oh, there's one for under 30 and it's got, you know, whatever, you know, to take your pick, right? And it's just like, I'm just going to pick it up used and have fun with it for a while, and then I'll move on to the next thing.
Right. But see, I'm going to go one step further here and say that that is the problem itself. They weren't worried about turning off existing buyers because there were no more existing buyers, if we're
That's
honest.
fair.
Like,
Yeah.
Nobody really cared enough about brand new Jaguars, which is why they went with such a shocking rebrand. And so they're not worried about buyer retention or customer retention at this point. They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks because they need new customers, because the only products really selling are the nostalgic products, are the vintage products that people are like, yeah, that's when Jaguar was great. That, and again, maybe we're turning into the old people that talk about stuff that was cool back when we were younger, but I think there's some truth to that, you know? And so I think at this point, it's not even so much like, oh, we got to make our current customers happy and find new ones too. I don't think they care about whatever few current customers they still had. I think this is like a Hail Mary to see if they can still, you know, stay around as a viable car company.
See, the cynical part of me wants to believe Eric and believe like that Jaguar is like, we're playing 4D chess right now.
Yeah.
We're just getting the conversation going. But then like there's also a part of me that's like, yeah, they wanted to try something new, and they went like they didn't just do something slightly new. They went with a totally new approach, totally new look, totally new feel, and just like really like swung for the fences, because that could have
Yeah.
like I feel like the rebrand could have easily been like, oh yeah, this is dope. Like, okay, I see what they're doing. Like it's a change for the brand. They're focusing more on the future and more of like a younger demo. Uh, they're kind of shedding some of that like luxury only roots that they have, and kind of trying to expand their customer base, and like these like even with the colors and the models that we're using, like we really want to show that we're inclusive of all of these things. And that could have backfired because of the state of the world that we're in right now, where you know Verizon has to basically like claim they've never done DEI in order for their merger to go, because the FCC is
Yeah.
so woke now in a
Oh
sense.
boy.
You know, so like it's hard. I'm trying to play both worlds, because like I love that they were so ambitious, and I love that they tried, and I love
Yeah,
that they
me
tried
too.
something completely different
Sure.
than what you would expect from a car brand, and it wasn't safe. It was definitely out on the outskirts of what a rebrand could be and what a rebrand could look like. Because I think they could have played it safe. They could have
Yeah.
done,
True.
oh, we're just going to change the R a little bit on the end of Jaguar, and we're going to make the Jaguar look a little more muscular because we're a stronger company now, or whatever it is. Something like really silly that is like, oh, okay, yeah, they rebranded themselves, and people probably would have talked about it, or maybe not even would have made the news cycle. But they've done something different, and now they're going to rebrand the rebrand, which worries me. Is like, oh, don't go back and be safe. Like keep
Right.
keep pushing the limits of what you're doing. Find something that find whatever that is that Jaguar has that's unique, and exploit that, because that's what's going to make people endear people to you.
So
I think they will, and I think, you know, I will say kudos to Tata, who has owned Jaguar, I don't know, for probably 15, 20 years now. They acquired it from Ford back in the day when Ford couldn't figure out what to do with it. They breathed new life into Jaguar Land Rover, and they've had some really cool models that started to dip. And so, you know, kudos to them for at least trying the rebrand and not trying to just kill it altogether. I mean, General Motors killed Oldsmobile and Pontiac and stuff back in the day when it
yeah.
wasn't working. So at least they're still trying something. And I don't know if it's to rebrand so that they can see the you know, that part of their business become more profitable, or if they're trying to rebrand enough to make it exciting enough to then be acquired by another another car company, right? Because it seems like, unfortunately, Jaguar has kind of been passed along over the last few decades when they couldn't sustain as a standalone company. And are we at the point now where Ford was, back in 2008 or whenever it was, where Tata's like, all right, look, we're going to try this one last Hail Mary here. And if this doesn't work, then somebody step up, because we can't do anything else with them. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Eric, I was going to ask, can you think of an example where a rebrand has actually been successful in the automotive world? Like, there's a lot of examples. I went straight to those examples you thought of, like Pontiac, Oldsmobile. What how many times has not to pick on American automakers, but like they are like a death sentence for any brand that's acquired by them, right? Like, there's very few examples of them taking something and making it better. And I can't really think of a rebrand that had a wow factor that like got people re-excited.
I think re-excited, interesting. It'd be hard to really kind of nail that one down. I will say that a rebrand that has been successful, in my opinion, would be Hyundai. And we've talked about them a lot. Yeah. Like, they went from being a kind of unknown Korean auto manufacturer, at least in the United States, in like the 80s or whatever it was, into the 90s. They were building econo boxes, even into the early 2000s. At some point, they decided, hey, we're going to pump a lot of money into this. We're going to hire the best designers. We're going to hire a good marketing team. We're going to rebrand this, new logo, new this and that. And now they're successfully, they have successfully transitioned into this company that can, kind of like Toyota and Lexus. They have their cars, the bread and butter cars. They're all decent looking cars that are all quality cars with good warranties to back them up. And they have the Genesis line, which is, doing well for them. I don't know statistically if it would compare to like Lexus and the stratospheric, like launch of Lexus in the 90s, but it's doing well for them. If I had to think of one that, maybe is working, maybe isn't working, it's somewhere between Jaguar and like Hyundai, it would probably be Mazda. Mazda at the moment is going through a bit of a rebrand. Their designs are on point. They're trying to move upscale, basically, right? So they're trying to move into that, not necessarily full-blown luxury market, but they want to be cross-shopped with the, with the Audis and the BMWs and things like that, where the sporty luxury side of things hits, because that seems to be a sweet spot in the automotive space right now. I personally like what they're doing with it. I don't know if the numbers definitively show whether it's a full-on success yet or not, but I do like what Mazda's doing, and they're doing it in a decent way. They didn't just drop everything, all their heritage, etc., and suddenly try to sell cars for twice what they were selling before. It's been an incremental increase in price and kind of a toe dip into that new space, while providing really solid options with cool, unique designs, and arguably the best like factory red paint that you can get on a car comes from Mazda. So I think that is kind of somewhere in the middle there. But time will tell. And right now, everybody's trying to navigate these crazy waters. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. And people are just trying to figure out what the future looks like and how to best navigate that. I mean, Rivian, for example, they just announced, Volkswagen announced that they've pumped another, I don't know, 1.3 billion or something into Rivian. I think Volkswagen Group is, they've talked about, I forget what the numbers are, but like 5.8 billion in total investment over the next few years into their R&D and tech and everything like that. And that's a cool approach, in my opinion, because it's not a full-blown acquisition. Like, Volkswagen hasn't just bought out Rivian and decided to take their tech with the idea that, okay, in 3 years, we're just going to tank the Rivian brand and we're going to get rid of it. We're just going to use some of their R&D and their tech and we're going to implement it into our cars. They've taken a different approach and said, look, we're the biggest car company on the planet, we being Volkswagen. We got a lot of cash. Let's let them do their thing, and let's just keep pumping money at them because we believe in them. And I think that is kind of a cool approach to things, and we'll see what they do with Scout Motors and how there's still a lot of gray area on how much tech Scout is sharing with Rivian and VW and vice versa and blah, blah, blah. But I think in general, having these newer brands instead of reviving old brands or acquiring stuff and dumping it, supporting these startups and these newer brands, or in Scout's case, is definitely a revival that I hope will go well. It's exciting times. I think the next 5 to 10 years, if the world doesn't go to complete shit, I think will be very exciting space, very exciting place in the car space.
Yeah, I
Man.
agree.
And earlier you mentioned that Mazda is like raising their prices. That kind of brings me to a sneaker story
Mm,
that's kind of been hitting the waves. The white cements Air Jordan 4 is
hmm
returning,
One of my
and
faves.
they're going to be $225. Now, I say that, but I think it was 2018 pair. The 2018 pair was 220, so it's only gone up $5 technically over the last 7 years. I'm doing math today
Yeah.
live on the podcast doing math, not
We were
my,
both failing miserably when
yeah,
it comes
yeah,
to math on the pod
yeah.
today.
So 7 years ago, it's gone up $5, which in that regard isn't terrible.
Right.
In general, though, paying $225 for a retro sneaker, now that's a problem. Like that's just too much. Because when they came out, what in the early 2010s, they were like $160 or something like that.
Yeah.
So the prices of sneakers, retro sneakers specifically, continue to go up, and I mean, I know like when retro cars come back or they bring back a retro car, they're obviously priced higher than they were when they originally launched, and sometimes they have like they're all upgraded in a sense, but it's never really like a true retro. Like the car industry doesn't do a true one for one retro of their cars,
Right.
um, which is obviously a business that we need to start. But
Yes. 100%.
a business that we need to do in retro. In the sneaker world, it's just getting a little bit out of hand. And like again, there's no equivalent in the car space. Like there's just nothing like similar to that that I can rant about, but I want to.
You know, first of all, I wonder like the 225 price point, is that like including tariffs? Because what are the tariffs right now? Are they really gonna stay down? Are they gonna go back up? Or it's hard to
Mm,
price things out. So I wonder what that really is. But while you were talking about all that, I just, to play devil's advocate, went to an inflation calculator just to see how that stacks up against the 160 in like, whatever it was. What year did I put it in 1990? What year did they launch? Was it 90? Was it?
Those are 89, but their
89,
retail on
yeah.
them in 89 was like 120 or 110.
Okay, let me go
So
back
like,
and readjust my math so that we're not misquoting. But this is fascinating, and it might surprise you guys. So we'll play devil's advocate here. 1989, $110 relaunch. What do you think, just off of sheer inflation, the price should be on them in April of 2025?
God, I know it's gonna be something ridiculous. I'm just getting
May
mad.
of 2025.
I'm gonna say probably like $400.
is it
Nick?
really? I
Nick?
mean, I feel like it's like 190.
No, it's depending on, if it was 1990, 1989, 110, 120, it's somewhere between 285 and $300.
Uh,
So, with that information, 225 is really not too bad. I think it's just a hard pill for us to. Oh, Jacques got things to say. I think it's a hard pill for us to swallow because we were there in 1990 when they first launched, and it's hard for us to grasp that. Well, why would I pay $225 for a pair of $110 shoes? That's my old guy voice. I don't know why I did that, but
yeah.
you know what I mean? I feel like that's it. But Jacques, you've got some things to say. Let's hear them.
Yeah, I just because you know what? It's not that I have anything to say. I guess I just kind of hit me like I had a little bit of an epiphany there. Is I think of it like I think about old tech.
Mm-hmm.
Like you
Interesting.
think of a VCR, that was
Right.
$1,000 in '89 or '90. You can get one now for 27 bucks. You know what I mean? Just like, or
Right.
even like
That's
Yeah.
DVD players or Blu-ray players, like they were like crazy expired $5, 6, 7, 8 thousand, $1,500 back in the day. You can go to Best Buy if they even still have them in stock and get one for like 40 bucks, and it does all the things. And so I'm like, I guess I
Yeah.
kind of think of it in that perspective of tech. It's like I can get a Blu-ray player right now for $40 that I would have
yeah.
spent $40,000 for back then. So maybe that's the lens that I'm seeing these through, and maybe I guess maybe I need to reframe or get a perspective change.
No, that's an interesting perspective because it applies to something that we've been talking about off the air that we need to dedicate a full episode to is like the nostalgia factor, right? Like some of these things, there is no
Yeah.
nostalgia. It's just old tech, or it's just an old pair of shoes, or it's just an old car, right? But then
Hmm.
you add in the nostalgia factor, and suddenly it's worth ungodly amounts of money. Why is random thing just popped into my head, but like I saw a buddy of mine who's a super talented Grammy winning music producer. He had like back in his teenage years, he was in a metal band. Now he's won his Grammys for like producing Mary J. Blige, and he's produced like tons of like hip hop in the ATL scene back in the day, and he's done a lot of really cool stuff. Shouts out to my boy Skimmy. If you're listening, you better be, because I support everything you do. But either way, he posted something the other day, and his metal band, he randomly found a demo CD from his metal band back in like high school or whatever on eBay, and it was selling for like $300. And he's like,
Mm.
what? So he bought it just because he had to have it. But it was like, the whole point of that is like, again, that's CD. It's old tech. Nobody even has CD players anymore. This is some old random obscure band, but the nostalgia factor to certain people made that worth a ton of money. And again, that's going to be a whole other podcast episode we got to dedicate time to. But I feel like
Yeah.
that plays into all of this,
Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Nick. Go. Because I
Definitely,
have too many
definitely
things to
does.
say.
Yeah, it definitely does. But I think those things come along for all of us, right? Like, there's certain things where like I'm going through storage and letting go of shoes and car parts and wheels and all this stuff right now, and I see stuff and I think, wow, like I would let this go, but like I don't want to let it go for like market rate when to me it's really important. So
Sure.
like
Mm.
there's an element of like I want somebody to buy this from me that appreciates that I'm one of the few people that was there that can say, hey, I was there and I'm willing to sell this moment of my life to you for that purpose, to knowing that like you're only buying this because you were also there, but you let go of your thing that proved it, whatever that is. The other part of what
Nick
I was
is
thinking
going
about
deep right now.
well, I think that's like I think there's an element to that in all of what we do, right?
Yeah.
But like that's also going back to the authenticity thing of film and storytelling and all the things that we do, right? Like when people listen to us and they hear Erik talk about his mini trucks, Jacques talking about his, Infinity, like this, all the sneakers that we go back and reference and remember, like that is how we bring them along on the journey with us. And it's like, it's not just that we were there to buy those $110 Jordans, but it's also that we were riding in our friend's bucket pickup truck, like all those elements of it are like, man, they live this life that we all collectively can relate to each other.
Yeah.
And I think that when you tie those things together becomes really, really powerful, not just from like a commercial standpoint, but from a like human standpoint. It's like thinking about the pandemic and how shitty it was for everyone. And we can all talk about it and relate to it. And, I think most of us are like, let's not talk about it and let's keep moving forward. But like, sometimes it's like, you need to have that conversation of, oh, I'm going through the breakdown as well. And I just need you, I need you to understand that I'm going through this. And you're going to say, hey, I had that same thing happen. What, we've talked about it with, deaths in the family and, the Jacques video recently, but like, not to go too far down that rabbit hole. I'm gonna bring it back to this conversation, and I don't want to do this. I looked it up, but I don't really want to say this because it kind of helps Nike's argument. But the federal minimum wage in 1989 was $3.35. The federal minimum wage in 2025 technically is $7.50. Although, California is 16 something, I think, at this point, and it's even higher if you work in restaurants, but to think of it that way, $3.35 as a minimum wage versus $7.50 as a minimum wage, it's almost spot on
the expense
price increase, right?
I hear you.
Yeah. So I'll just leave that with you guys. I don't know what to do with it, but it's an interesting.
Yeah, it's a very interesting argument.
Oh man, that's we open up a whole can of worms here, but
Yeah, we're not gonna get into it, but We just putting the information out there. It's 225
Do
for
with it what you
for
want.
do with it what you will for a remake
Yeah.
of a shoe. Other
Yes.
thing that's popped up recently that's been really big news in the sneaker world is Foot Locker is being acquired by Dick's Sporting Goods,
Yes.
um, which is very very interesting because I think most of us would have thought that it would have been the opposite way that Foot Locker would have acquired Dick's Sporting Goods, but it looks like the roles have been reversed. Now I haven't been keeping up on Foot Locker stock. I don't own any Foot Locker stock. And so I wasn't paying attention, but apparently Foot Locker stock was down pretty low. It was like $12
Yeah.
or something like that a share, which makes makes it more understandable why things are happening kind of the way that they're happening with the reverse. But it also made me have a bit of I would say a Nick moment here, and in my reflections of this deal happening and what it means is that a lot of my nostalgia is seemingly reflected in consumerism, which like
Mm.
kind of bothers me a little bit. I was like, why do I care how Foot Locker shows up in Dick's Sporting Goods? It's because I used to buy things from them,
Yeah.
and like it's like that kind of messed me up a little bit. Like I shouldn't care if they keep Foot Locker or they destroy Foot Locker, but I care because I bought things from them, not that somebody made for me or something that I was doing back then. It was because I bought things from them, and I was like, why? Why do you? What is this? What is this?
Mm.
This is not nostalgia. This is just consumerism.
I got to play a
Hmm.
little devil's advocate on that one though, because you have memories. I have shared memories with you sitting at the ESPY Awards because of Foot Locker. Like I know you worked with Foot Locker on projects that you were on the Ellen show like multiple times from Foot Locker, right? Or connect like through that. So like
Right.
not
It
to
was
say that there's
through
not
that lens.
a commerce lens because it's a retail store, right? But like
Yes.
you also have friends, memories, things that are more than the commerce. So like there is some deeper meaning to a brand like Foot Locker. If Dick's Sporting Goods was like, we just bought Walgreens, you'd be like, Walgreens? Like you wouldn't have an opinion at it at all. You just be like, oh, great, another company buying another company. Weird. Right. So
Right.
like you almost are even more like it's double edged, I think, more than just like I totally understand the like kind of being like a little upset with yourself about the commercialism of it all, because I feel like that's part of where sneakers has gone for me in a lot of ways in the last few years. But then I do have those times where I'm like flipping through photos or some memory pops up and you're like, whoa, I forget all the cool things that like actually that I got to be a part of because of this weird obsession that I randomly met Jacques, 10, 15 years ago, being obsessed over this stuff and creating content around it and being like, wow, this is crazy. Like, look what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like
So
so. I guess my go ahead, Eric. Go ahead.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say so. My argument, like I get what you're saying, but it's like those are moments about sneakers to me as opposed to
Hmm.
about Foot Locker. Like I got Converse to play basketball in high school, and I just so happened to buy them from Foot Locker, but like the nostalgia attached to getting those shoes was me going to work with my uncle and doing electrical work at a house to earn the money to get the shoes. So like that's like so like those shoes have a special place because of that memory attached to them through that lens, but it's not necessarily Foot Locker. If they had them at I don't know, wherever it was, Foot Action or whatever it was,
Yeah.
Athlete's Foot back then. And like that's where like that nostalgia
Hmm.
piece would have been attached to. It wouldn't have been attached to Foot Locker as the institution, I guess. And that's kind of where I'm like, do I care like do I care about Foot Locker and how they're presented, or do I care about the that I was working with my uncle and he taught me these valuable lessons as a kid that are going to live with me for the rest of my life in order to get these shoes that I really wanted because I wanted to be cool like all the other kids on the basketball team, even though they didn't get to play better or anything like that. Like where does the nostalgia line end and then the consumerism of it like begin? I guess is what I'm struggling with.
I mean, I don't have the same ties as you guys, but I guess at the end of the day, like it's a lot easier to be associated with a bunch of footlockers than a bunch of dicks. So I'll just leave it at that.
Oh, that was good. I mean, Foot Locker. So here's another thing. Like Foot Locker, this is I think what is the challenge with businesses in America, globally too, but like specifically in America, Foot Locker is actually just a morphed subsidiary turned into a big company of a company that we all probably remember, but most people don't, called Woolworth. Woolworth is like where our parents and grandparents would shop. And the like acquisitions, there's so much that has happened over the years that like the trend, in my opinion, what happened was Foot Locker is realizing that sneakers is as a nerd out thing is no longer the top pop culture thing. So it's going to shift back around to sports. Sports will always hold, you know, a much bigger shopping cart, let's say. And to the point of Dick's, you know, like Dick's is a massive company compared to Foot Locker. But like Foot Locker also has been losing to JD Sports in recent years in America. JD Sports bought Hibbett, bought Shoe Palace, bought Finish Line. You know, like they really came into America swinging. And I think like that, along with Foot Locker acquiring Atmos in New York and all these other, you know, they're part of GOAT, and they're like kind of just, they've got their hands in all of like sneaker culture, but they're not like, they don't feel like they're authentic to sneaker culture the way they once did, you know, 5-10 years ago. And I think that has been the obvious sign of that is the price of stocks dropping. But then like, if you really think about it, like we're always going to need sneakers, whether that's for basketball, like you said, for, you know, cleats for baseball, golf shoes, whatever. Like people will always buy footwear of some kind. But I think like having the bigger basket of things that people can buy as far as like a big company goes, like a Dick's Sporting Goods, like this just goes back to like the way sneakers were in the 90s, right? You know, yeah, you could get a pair of shoes from Foot Locker, but you were also going to go into a Big Five Sporting Goods. You were going to go into an Oshman's, you know, like you were going to go into 20 different sporting goods stores to see what they had. And I think that's kind of where we're at in this weird, like full circle moment with like, you know, kind of shifting back around. And ultimately it gives the company a bigger, you know, better buying power. It gives them a little bit more creative options in terms of the way that they present things. You know, there's a reason for, you know, like move away from the LeBron James of the sneaker world and go to like a, you know, I don't know, like a Giannis or a Paul George or a James Harden, and guys that are not necessarily going to sell massive amounts of shoes, but have signature shoes. Now, Dick's Sporting Goods can kind of monetize multiple aspects of that partnership. You can buy a Giannis jersey, you can buy a maybe some Giannis apparel, some, you know, a Gatorade thing or whatever, and it becomes more of a reasonable business model, in my opinion, than like Foot Locker just being so dedicated to sneakers and trying to grow. You know, they just like JD Sports is I think they're taking away from like the things that make sneakers great is like you can only stay connected to the communities that drive this by remaining small or having an incredible team of people that are very well connected to the communities that make all this work. And I think we've lost sight of that in the sneaker space. I think we've lost sight of that in business as a whole. But I think this is also going to be a really interesting kind of experiment to see how this goes, because, you know, kind of to your joke about Verizon and, you know, all of the BS that companies are going through with, you know, the political landscape of America, it's becoming more and more dangerous for brands to be acquired by these bigger businesses, in my opinion. You know, like there's like the stories of you know, I think like Toys R Us, right? Like I'm not saying that Dick's is going to do this to Foot Locker, but like, if you don't have those memories with Foot Locker specifically, Foot Locker is a little bit unique for me because I remember walking in and seeing the scoreboard when I was a kid and like all of those
Yeah.
crazy stores.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
kind of like the real life version of East Bay. And obviously
Yeah.
those two companies combined at some point and then they shut
Those
down East Bay
combined.
or whatever. But
Yeah.
the interesting part about like these conglomerates is that so many of them come in and the private equity will just, you know, sell whatever they can to make a bunch of money off the business and then let the business die. Toys R Us being the prime example of that, right? There's this
Yeah.
2-year story of basically they came in private Toys R Us and Red Lobster. I can't remember which one this story is from in my mind, sorry, but basically the private equity buys the company, realizes that the company had been buying the land underneath all of the restaurants or stores, and the private equity comes in, sells all the land, and then charges the company a lease to lease the land and the location back. And because the business model was not set up for that, it took 2 years or whatever for Toys R Us to go out of business after that private equity came in, because they can't afford to pay a lease when their whole business model was based on buying the land and having that value on top of it.
Yeah.
And I think we're headed towards like a situation where we're going to have like a hard reset with a lot of this stuff, or we're going to have like some problems because we're not in a time where people are actually starting businesses to replace those holes in our economy. You know, where do you go buy toys for your kids? Amazon? You know, where do you go buy?
Yeah.
You know, like all these things are kind of like, we don't have to do it all the same way. But if we take away all the options for people, we're kind of taking away what we claim makes America a great place to live, right? Like the experiences and the beauty of it is like you can go to a mall and shop from a small business or whatever, but like we're moving so far away from that like I think people are looking at, you know, myself included, looking at other places like, wow, that's probably a cool place to live if I can just like buy my food from a local place. You know, like we're spoiled in Monterey, we can get a lot of food locally, but it's I don't know. I just did a little like depression spiral there. I apologize about that, but I think it's just a weird time, and I think this Foot Locker acquisition is gonna be heavy on the sneaker industry if people are not very careful and aware of how it's gonna go.
Yeah, my hope is that it's strictly strategic, and you know, again, living out kind of like I do in the country burbs, as I like to call it.
Country burbs.
Yeah,
Curbs.
there's like the curbs. The closest Foot Locker is a long way away, and there are probably like, you know, 3 or 4 Dick's Sporting Good locations within like a 15-20 mile radius.
Wow.
And so I think what this is doing, I think it's kind of mutually beneficial. I think it allows Foot Locker to reach the suburban audience that they don't really get, because a lot of people moved out of the city nowadays. It's urban areas are so saturated and so expensive that most people are moving out of there, and they're going away to the suburbs, to, you know, further out. And so they're now shopping at the quote unquote big box stores like the Dick's Sporting Goods for their shoes, their baseball equipment, their football equipment, everything like that. And so I think it helps Foot Locker in that regard by getting them out to that audience. But also I think it keeps like a Dick's Sporting Goods super relevant in the urban communities and everything, right? Like now they're, unless they kill it off, like, oh, okay, they acquired Foot Locker, but they're not changing our Foot Locker, so to speak, because people do have ties to them like you guys do. And I think it also, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Dick's is an international company. I think they're domestic only, but Foot Locker does have locations in like Europe and Asia and Australia and stuff. And so I feel like this allows, kind of like the opposite of what JD did, to come into this market. I feel like this allows Dick's to go into a much bigger international market, and hopefully everybody plays ball and everybody's happy and it is all good. You know, that would be my thing on that. Side note, I know we're running out of time here, and we've talked a lot about that. Apparently a guest just showed up. So hold on, I'm going to switch off my headphones here. I'm going to go to a monitor here. Can you guys still hear me? All right.
Yes.
Yeah, we can still hear
so
you.
we got a surprise guest at the 11th hour here on the podcast. Come on in, buddy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
This is my son Enzo.
The newest
He's
addition.
excited to come
The
in
newest
here and
addition
say hi.
to the
Yeah, so
podcast.
what's up, everybody? You got to talk to the
What's up,
microphone.
Enzo?
What's up,
Nick?
Enzo?
Hi.
So I guess he wanted to show us something. Why don't you hold that up there to the camera and show everybody what you built today?
Oh, yeah.
Very nice.
Here, I'll hold it there so they can still see your face. So tell everybody what this is.
It's the orange Fast and the Furious Supra.
What? And you
Nice.
built
Amazing.
this today?
The top can go off.
The top can go off too?
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that's
Wow.
incredible. Wow. Well, look, we're almost going to end the podcast here, but dude, I want to thank you for coming on. Oh, he is. He's converting it right now to the Targa,
Nice.
and it goes in the back. What is that covering in the back there?
We got to show us. We got to. We can't see it, Enzo. Show us. Show us. Show us.
I'll show it because it's way up here, and you can talk into the microphone. So what's it? What are we covering back here with the Targa top?
The roof.
The roof. And what is all that in there if we take the roof out?
That thing,
Yeah.
that white thing is the speaker.
And what are those like blue and orange things that were in there a second ago?
They are nitrous bottles.
Whoa, dude. This
Amazing.
is incredibly detailed. And you built this all by yourself?
Mhm.
Congrats, dude.
Nicely
That's
done.
awesome.
Good job, man. Good job.
Here, I got to lift you up a little
Excellent.
bit. We're going to say
Excellent.
bye to everybody because you can say bye to everybody on the podcast.
Bye.
Say thanks for tuning in to the Cars and Kicks show.
Thanks for tuning in for the Cars and Kick Show.